Hi, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started here in just 1 second. It looks like Commissioner Pilch is just logging in here, so we're just going to give it a couple more seconds till he's online. Great. There we are. All right, then. 7 o'clock, everyone. We will go ahead then and call this April 28th Albany Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. With that, staff, if we could get roll call, please.
Yes, Commissioner Donaldson.
Here.
Commissioner McLeod.
Here.
Commissioner Moman.
Here.
Commissioner Pilch.
Present.
Chair Waddy.
Here. Thank you. Ex parte communications. Does anyone have any ex parte communications to disclose this evening?
No.
All right. Seeing head nods, no. We will move on then to item 4, which is our consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted on by one motion. If there is any member of the public who wishes to pull any of these items off the consent calendar or any member of the commission, we will go ahead and hear those items separately. I do want to announce before we go into all of these that there is one additional item not otherwise agendized on the consent calendar that we would like to call up for an indefinite continuance, and that's item 7-1 on the regular calendar. That is currently being proposed for an indefinite continuance, which means effectively it's being tabled for the moment and it will be renoticed at a later date when it is ready to move forward. So all in all, I'll go ahead and read through the consent calendar as it stands then right now. Item 4-1, these are the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from April 14th. Item 4-2, Planning Application 21-014, Design Review for a 2-level addition at 919 Adams Street. Item 4-3, this is Planning Application 21-020, a design review and parking reduction for a 2-level addition at 970 Standage. And I'd like to note on this item, this too is needing to be continued. The applicant was unable to get the story polls up. And so that is being proposed under the consent calendar for continuance to May 14th, date certain. So we'll include that as part of the consent calendar action. And then, as I mentioned, pulling up item 7-1, which again is Planning Application 21-004, Conditional Use and Design Review for 904 Masonic, which is being proposed for an indefinite continuance. So a couple ad libs on the fly here, but those are the 4 items we have before us on the consent calendar. Commissioners, do any of you wish to pull any of those items as described off the consent calendar tonight? Commissioner Donaldson?
I'd like to pull the project of 919 Adams, application 21014 for a brief discussion.
Okay, why don't we go ahead then and pause on that. If there are no other commissioners who wish to pull items 4-1, 4-3, and 7-1 as described, why don't we go ahead and open it up for public comment? Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on those 3 items moving forward as described?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. Then with that, do we have a motion, commissioners? Public comment is closed, and do we have a motion on those 3 items? Again, item 4-1, meeting minutes as proposed. Item 4-3, 970 Standage being continued to May 14th, and item 7-1 being continued indefinitely. Commissioner McLeod?
I can move that.
I would move that we approve the, or we jointly approve the consent calendar as described by Chair Waddy.
Okay, great. Commissioner Pilch, is that a second by you then? All right,
Yes,
great. Then on that motion, Commissioner Donaldson.
So a vote, you vote yes, we'll vote now, so yes.
Okay, great. Commissioner Moman?
Yes.
Commissioner Pilch?
Yes.
Commissioner McLeod?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So those 3 items are approved/continued as described. And with that, we will turn back to item 4-2 on our consent calendar, which was pulled off by Commissioner Donaldson. Commissioner Donaldson, would you like us to move forward with sort of a full presentation, or did you just have a quick question for staff?
No, I don't think I need a full presentation. I want to make some comments on this. There's some concerns. So from
Maybe before we do that, then should we go ahead and give the project sponsor, or do sort of, if you've got concerns, maybe we can turn to that under some deliberations if we want to have a quick opportunity for the project sponsor to present, or?
I don't think we need that. Mhm.
Oh, okay, then go ahead, Commissioner Donaldson.
Yeah, I don't think we need that. Because the project is nicely designed, I really don't have any trouble with the design review component of what we're doing. We're not allowed to look at the ADU component. I understand that. But I just have to comment that from a land use standpoint, this project bothers me. It's in an R3 zone, and in R3 zone, adjacent Sampato like that should have higher density housing, I think. I think that's what it's intended to do. So what we have here is a nice little 1920s single family home that's being expanded and updated and modernized, and with an ADU added. It bothers me. It's a nice project in the wrong place, and I think, it bothers me a lot that we don't have a multifamily residential R3 at an R3 density going in here. The other thing I don't like about it is I have to object to the state sort of mandating the ADUs in this situation here. They kind of do a one-size-fits-all communities. And in this situation, the ADU takes up the entire backyard of what would be a normal Albany single-family home. And the ADU really has no open space associated with it, no outdoor, no private open space associated with it. And that also bothers me. I think it leads to a sort of state mandated corruption of our zoning code, and it just really bothers me. So I don't know what else to do. I don't think I have any power to do anything here. I guess I could vote no, or just against the project. I might do that, just because I think it's the wrong land use, and so I don't think single family homes are the highest and best use of an R3 site. And I would like to see it converted, this whole lot converted into a multifamily, just like the zoning code intends. So when we did the zoning ordinance in 2004, we said we wouldn't allow secondary residential units in R2 and R3, with the idea that would be incentivize people who owned homes in R2 and R3 to develop duplexes and triplexes in R2 and R3. We don't have those rules anymore, but I rue the day that we changed that. And in fact, the state mandates allowing ADUs in a situation like this. So I think this is an unfortunate project. That's all. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, with that then, why don't we do need to make sure we take public comment on this item. So why don't we go ahead and open this item up for public comment. We can turn it back and take a vote after public comment or further discussion. Chris, are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay, we'll say last call here, members of the public, if you'd wish to speak on this item. And if none, seeing none, then we will go ahead and close public comment. And we can turn it back to the commission. I would actually love to see if the applicant is on the line, just in response to Commissioner Donaldson's comments, to see if the project applicant can describe a little bit of, certainly why they're interested in pursuing this project versus a larger, more dense project at this site. Chris is the project applicant on the line?
I believe the property owner is online. There's two accounts, but I'll allow one of them to speak. Pontip, you can speak now if you would like to on your project. Oh, I'm actually now seeing the project architect has now logged in. I will allow her to speak. Vasilia.
Hi there, Christopher. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for giving me this time. Let me just say from the beginning, Pantip, when she came to me with this project, she has two adult children that want to stay and live in that home with her, or live on that property that she's owned for some time. And space-wise, it just wasn't going to work. And then at the same time, she had one more member of family I think she was thinking about for the ADU. So there's a choice here. Either the lot or the property grew for her family's purposes, or she try her luck at the market out there in the Bay Area, which isn't favorable for anybody right now, unless you have a large sum of money. So, we both I spoke to her at great lengths about the lot use and the amount of space that was going to be left once the ADU was in place and all these other aspects of the project, the addition and all that. But to her, it really meant more about the space that she needs for her family to keep them where they need to be, especially now that, she's seeing it even more realistically. They're working from home. So either they sell that little house and move elsewhere, or they keep that little home that's located in the middle of, it's a large apartment building on one side, a commercial building on the other side, a parking lot behind them. Definitely the area has kind of grown around them and changed. But here they are wanting to stay in Albany in a house that they love. So all we can do as architects is interpret and take their wish list and make it so that it fits what they can live with. And that's, I feel like, what we've done. Yes, the state has done a lot to create this ADU streamlined process, but we also have a home now that is usable by a family that before it wasn't realistic to do so.
Great, thank you. With that then, do any of the other commissioners wish to provide comments on this project? Commissioner Pilch.
Yes, thank you. I perhaps should know this, but this is a question, I guess, for staff. Is it possible to have zoning code? So in R2 and R3, we allow multifamily to a certain extent within certain guidelines or certain boundaries in height limits, etc. Is it possible in such zones to say that any building must be multifamily? Is it possible to create zoning code like that? Does anyone do that? Or I'm just speculating very generally.
So I guess I can answer this in kind of two ways. Yes, when it comes to zoning code, you do have discretion over determining, density and that sort of thing, type of housing product. However, as the commission well knows, in some of our R3 districts, and I'm thinking in particular Adams and Keynes, we do have these situations where we have existing single family dwellings that, maybe adjacent to triplexes, fourplexes, higher density product. I think for the most part, it is somewhat non-conforming. However, it can still remain a single family dwelling. It can still be expanded. We do have provisions in our zoning code that do allow the single family units to continue to remain and be repaired, upgraded, and expanded.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking is, and it wouldn't seem to be fair to say that lots with a single family home must become multifamily. But do cities ever have zoning codes that say if the property is sold, it must be developed as multifamily, for example, and to have a minimum density rather than a maximum density as well?
Yeah, minimum density can be set as part of the zoning code.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Given that it's a family that is wanting to expand and keep the family together, to me it makes sense. The project makes sense, and it's unfortunate that the loss of outdoor space certainly, but they are getting more space for the family. And it's certainly within their right to do so. So I am happy to support the project.
Sure, Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I agree with that. I think Commissioner Donaldson's objections are kind of on a philosophical or policy level, more than with the project itself or this family's desire to stay in Albany, which I think ultimately we have to support them. They're within their rights to do it. It's an attractively designed little project. With the exception of the lack of open space, but I think they have also tried to create some balcony open space, but that's on the main unit. There's lots of little tiny hideaway kind of dwellings that are perfect for some people that don't necessarily need a lot of outdoor space. I guess I'm just basically happy to support this. It's a very small lot. It's a 3,750 square foot lot. So even if they did try to develop it as a larger housing block of some kind, it would still be pretty darn tiny and not support much more than a duplex, which is kind of essentially what we're getting here, is a duplex. The way it could be developed would have to be in some sort of lot consolidation process with the parking lot, the building next door, or something where you could combine 2 or 3 or 4 lots or something, which is not inconceivable, but very difficult to do unless, it's a difficult process for that to happen. So to sum up, I'm happy to support the project.
Commissioner Momin.
I agree with my fellow commissioners. They are all valid points. I totally agree with Commissioner Donaldson. This is a nice project in a wrong location, and we are kind of missing the opportunity of having some higher density in that location. But I also agree with Commissioner McLeod that given the size of the parcel, you can't really expect too many housing units unless it is combined with adjacent lots. And so if it is the wish of the family to expand the house and stay together, and if it is also permitted by the code, then I would support that.
Great, thanks. I'll just go ahead and chime in on my thoughts. I'll loop back to you in just a second, Commissioner Donaldson. But similarly, absolutely agree with you, Commissioner Donaldson, in philosophy. And I would feel very differently about this project if this was a vacant lot and there was a proposal for new construction that looked like this. I do, though, feel very differently, especially given the housing market. People don't always have the choice of being in a financial position to sell and actually be able to acquire another piece of property locally. And so I think, to me, a big part of this is they are densifying. They could have just as easily been coming forward with just an expansion project. So I appreciate the fact that they are densifying by adding an ADU. And I do also think about it in terms of the number of people housed. A larger home that will allow for additional family members to move in is still housing more people than the current situation. And sometimes when we look at multi-unit buildings, especially when they're, studio units or 1-bedroom units, and you look at the total number of people that are going to be housed on that piece of property, that also is a consideration. I mean, we can't always dictate that, but I think there's some presumptions that can be made with a certain number of bedrooms that are being created and the likely number of people being housed. So I totally agree with the philosophy. I think if it was a different existing condition, I'd be very open to voting in a different manner on this. But given the fact that this is an existing single family home, I think people should have the ability to modify and accommodate their family's needs. So I'm happy to support this project as proposed. And Commissioner Donaldson, you did have your hand up again.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, thank you, everyone, and I appreciate the discussion. And I think that's what I wanted to start. I guess was the thought process on that line. I have one other last thought. I'd like to ask the architect and the owner to consider extending the deck at the back of the house and between the ADU and the house. I think you would appreciate that in living in the house. Eventually you'd be able, if you expanded that deck to fill more of that space, then just make it an entranceway. You'd be able to put some chairs there, maybe some tables, maybe sit outside on some nice days. And I think it would make the situation more livable for you. So it's just my recommendation to the architect and the owner, because that extra unit really does, the ADU really does not have any good outdoor open space. And I think outdoor open space is important as a part of a housing thing. So, and I appreciate other commissioners' comments on the situation. I understand that. I understand your points. So thank you. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, with that, is there anyone who would like to make a motion? Commissioner McLeod? Sure.
Sure. I move that we approve, let's see, what is this project number?
Yeah.
Hold on. It's I move that we approve item 4-2 PA 21-014, two-level addition at 919 Adams Street.
Okay, great. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Commissioner Pilch? All right, then. On that motion, Commissioner Donaldson.
I think I'll vote yes. So I'll
Okay.
go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Momin.
Yes.
Commissioner Pilch.
Yes.
Commissioner McLeod.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So that project does pass 5-0. And just a reminder to the project applicant to leave those story poles up for the 14-day appeal period. With that, then, commissioners, we are moving through our agenda here. Next, that gets us through the consent calendar. And with that, we will move to item 5, announcements and communications, of which there are none. Item 6 on our agenda tonight is general public comment. As a reminder, general public comment is for folks who would wish to address the commission on items that are relevant to the Planning and Zoning Commission and that are not otherwise agendized on tonight's calendar. So if there are any members of the public who wish to speak to the commission about Planning and Zoning Commission matters that are not otherwise agendized, now is your time to go ahead and raise your hand and get in the queue. Chris, do we have any speakers?
We have one speaker right now, and that's Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes to speak starting now.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I didn't see anywhere on the agenda anything regarding the sidewalks relevant to the homeowners. Just regarding the shared property, 50-50, the sidewalk. I don't know, is that considered real property? Possibly, I guess, because it's real estate. It's kind of interesting, 50-50. The liability is obviously 50% on the city, 50% on the homeowner. And I always get confused, why hasn't the city or anybody adopted a policy to where the residents aren't liable? I mean, I don't understand the pros and cons. I mean, I know some of them. I mean, what are some of the pros to where the homeowner gets to own half of the sidewalk? I mean, what are some pros of the homeowner owning half the sidewalk? I mean, does that allow them to plant a tree? Does that give them a choice of what city regulated tree on some list that they get to plant on the sidewalk in front of their house? I mean, is that really the only thing? I mean, that's the only thing I could think of of being a homeowner is you get a choice on some tree that gets planted in front of your house on a sidewalk from a pre-approved list from the city. It's not like you could plant whatever tree you want, even though you own it. You still don't get a full choice. So, I mean, what's the point of owning the sidewalk 50% if you don't even get to plant what tree you want? Let's say you want a fruit tree or a lemon tree. Well, can't plant a fruit tree. Or goes that out the window. So, I mean, why is that a good thing for the homeowner to own half of the sidewalk? Maybe they get to pick what the sidewalk's made out of: rubber, concrete, asphalt, chip and seal. I mean, obviously there's another list of what types of sidewalks are approved, right? Rubber. I mean, I've seen rubber on Lower Solano, right there by the old subway. So obviously rubber sidewalks is a thing, and that's just a test strip. So maybe a future agenda item, you know, maybe we can clarify some of the pros and cons on the homeowners doing this. Otherwise, they just got to pay extra insurance and it poses a liability. So
There are no other speakers at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And just while we have this moment, I'm just wondering, Anne, if there might be somebody within staff who could offline reach out to Jeremiah to answer his questions about sidewalks, just so that he doesn't feel like he has to come back during public comment and ask the same question over and over. Sidewalks are not under the jurisdiction of the Planning and Zoning Commission, but I'm sure there's somebody back at staff level who can help answer some of those questions.
Yeah, and it's actually within the Public Works Department, not the Community Development Department. So yeah.
Great. So anyhow, Jeremiah, Public Works, somebody from staff should be able to connect with you to answer your questions. Okay, with that then, we will close public comment since there are no other members of public comment wishing to speak right now. And we will move on to item 7. Item number 7, we already heard that was continued indefinitely, the one item 7-1. With that, we will move on to item 8, new business. 8-1 is housing element annual progress report. Staff, I assume you have a presentation.
Yes, good evening, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to make a brief presentation to you on our annual report on the housing element. As you know, California law requires cities to adopt a housing element, which is a portion of our general plan. And the purpose of the housing element is to assess the city's need for housing and establish policies and programs to ensure that each city is meeting its fair share of the regional and state need for additional housing. Our current housing element was adopted in 2015 and was certified by the state shortly thereafter, and is in effect through January of 2023. As you well know, we're beginning the process of preparing a new housing element. Our consultant, Barry Miller, will be back to the commission in the very near future to continue to work on that process with you. There are a couple of things about the housing element that are unique. One of them is that the content of it and the structure and format and so forth is highly prescriptive based on state law and based on HCD policies and requirements, and their certification of the housing element is necessary for it to be in effect. The other part of this that's highly prescriptive is the annual report. And so what you received as an attachment to our staff report was a printout of an Excel file, portions of an Excel file that basically every city uploads this Excel file into a portal that HCD operates. So I apologize if it is packaged in a way that is maybe doesn't lend itself super well to reading on paper or on the screen, but that's the way it is. With housing elements, we do what we're asked to do. What I'd like to do is share my screen briefly and give you a quick overview of where we stand with the housing element and its implementation since it was adopted in 2015. A second here. So this is kind of the good news slide, and there's a bad news slide that follows. But the good news is overall, our housing production in Albany is been meeting and actually kind of currently a little bit above what we would have hoped to achieve for the last for this current housing element cycle. As you can see, the stacked bars there are the requirements that we were required to plan for, and then the line is actual housing production in the form of building permits that have occurred in those years. So this is total. The different colors in those stack bars are the different affordabilities, and we'll get to that in a minute. And there's some issues there that every city is struggling with. But overall, we are producing housing in Albany, and presumably, if our current trends continue, we will be close to the ultimate goal of 335 units of housing produced between 2015 and 2023. So the challenge is the affordable component of housing production. And this is where the city of Albany, as well as just about every other city in the state, is not producing the amount of affordable housing that the economists and demographers believe that are necessary in order to meet housing demand in the state. So these three stack bars are the different levels of income that are considered part of our target. And the blue is very low housing for very low income households. The, I guess it's kind of rust or orange colored bar is for low income households. And then the grayish bar is for moderate income households. And moderate income goes up to 120% of median income. So as you can see, we're doing less than half of what we would like to be able to do for affordable housing. And this is not unique to Albany. This is pretty common to every city. And it's a combination, more than anything else, it's really the lack of financial resources to subsidize the development of affordable housing. One thing I do want to mention about this is that the housing element annual report is a report on building permits primarily. And we also report in there a separate tab our entitlements, but what they're really tracking are building permits. And what's interesting to observe is that our entitlement process, we're entitling even more projects than we're permitting, but some of these projects are not coming to fruition for a variety of reasons. The big one that's worth mentioning in particular is the Saha Affordable Housing Project. It was entitled in 2019. It will have a total of 62 units of housing. 61 of those will be affordable for people of very low or low income. And there'll be one manager unit that may or may not be affordable. So those are in the pipeline, but because a building permit hasn't been issued, that doesn't count and doesn't show up in our annual report as a fully approved project. And the reason it hasn't been issued a building permit yet is that Saha is still working at assembling the financing for the project. We obviously hope that that happens again soon in the next year or so, but it's a very competitive field for limited resources for affordable housing. And then some of the other units that aren't getting approved in 2020 is a good example. We approved 34 units at the planning stage. Many of these are ADUs. And of those, 26 have actually gotten a building permit. And we don't know exactly why that is, that some of them drop off. I suspect many people are surprised or not discouraged by the cost of construction, and maybe they put it off. And it might be an interesting research task to reach out to some of these projects that have been approved but haven't gotten building permits to see what the explanation is for why they haven't moved forward. The final part of I'll stop my screen share. The final part of the annual report is a listing of the policies and programs that are contained in the housing element, and a very brief one or two sentence explanation of what the status is. We will be revisiting that in much more detail in the near future as we work on the new housing element. The new housing element will have two parts to it, well, many parts, but with respect to policies and programs, we first will go through the existing ones, this list that's attached, and then we'll update those, maybe make some revisions, introduce some new ideas, and then incorporate those new policies and programs into the new housing element. So we weren't planning to go through that in detail tonight because I think it's really a better discussion to have with our housing element consultant in the room to be able to go through that and for him to make his recommendations to you and take your feedback as he's working on the document. So at that point, I think I will pause and see if you have any questions. This is no action is required this evening. This is something that staff submits annually. And just like I said, this is informational just so you get an idea of where we're at. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. So we'll start out with questions. After we go through questions, we'll go ahead and open public comment, and then we'll come back for commentary. So yes, Commissioner Momin, you have your hand up for questions.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Looks like, we might have a deficit in affordable housing. And if we are not able to permit that many housing units, the table, the first sheet in the report shows that we have 134 units remaining, and out of that 80 are affordable. And then Saha has 61 units, and there are some other projects which would have some. So it looks like we might be falling short of 50 units. So would there be any action on the city, or would there be any penalty or something that we will have to bear?
Thank you for your question. It's a good one, and it's something that in the housing advocacy world, there's a lot of discussion about whether there should be some sort of sanction or something to cities that aren't getting actual construction to happen. I think this would be a challenging situation because, as I mentioned, every city is more or less in the same boat. And so a program where cities are penalized in some way for not producing housing is going to affect every city more or less the same. And at that point, I'm not sure what's the benefit is. If everybody's in the same boat, you're just penalizing every city. But I think there is some frustration that that we're not producing housing quickly enough in the state. And my sense is that most cities have no philosophical objection. Some people may, but overall policymakers don't have philosophical objections to affordable housing such that it's being stalled. It's just cities don't have the financial resources to do it more than anything else. In some cases, they don't have a good site to do it, which is another challenge for us in other smaller urban high density cities where there aren't that many vacant lots that we can work with.
Yeah, and then my next question is, you mentioned that we have these policies and programs, and the report just mentioned the status. So maybe that might be part of Barry Miller's next stage of work. But I would really like to know what is the impact of these programs and policies. Like there are all these range of policies. I think categorized in a couple of goals, and some of them include code changes. Some of them are like financial incentives and things like that. So I think it would be interesting to know and useful to know like which policies and which program created more housing, and like how we utilize them in our next stage, next cycle, housing element cycle, how we develop, enhance those policies, and maybe create alternatives to the ones that did not really work. One policy that I'm looking at is the inclusionary housing, and from the report, it doesn't look like that policy has created a lot of units, but I'm seeing a lot of ADUs. So it looks like some of them are working, some of them are not working as well as we would expect them to.
I think you're accurate about that the inclusionary housing program hasn't generated a lot of affordable units because we haven't had that many large projects come through the process. And ADUs are saving us in this housing cycle. They're those moderate price. They count as moderate income, even though they're not deed restricted. They count as moderate income, and that's how we're getting to the ADUs, the Saha project eventually, and then a few other projects. But mostly the ADU regulations have really opened up the housing development opportunities for us here in Albany.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
there is a last observation in the report, which is regarding point 4G. It is about incentives for affordable housing, and it says in the status completed. So why is that completed? Like, shouldn't that be kind of an ongoing, continuing policy?
Can you tell me the policy number again?
4G.
4G. So we have, in this particular policy is focused on our planning and building department fees. So we have adopted a master fee schedule that basically waives planning and building fees for affordable units. So if you're building a project that's 50% affordable, we would charge you 50% of the normal planning and building fees. If it's 100% affordable, there's no planning and building fees.
Okay,
So that the adoption of that policy is complete.
Got
The
it.
application of it will continue.
Application is ongoing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Great. Are there any other questions? Commissioner Donaldson.
Sure. Yeah, Jeff. Let's see here. Do you have any information now? Is there any money coming from the feds in the COVID relief bill and anything like that that would be coming to the states and then to the cities for housing, and particularly for affordable housing? And could that help the Saha project? And I'm just, or are there any other initiatives coming down that we might be looking at benefiting from in either in this cycle or the next cycle of the housing element?
So I'm not the best person in the city to answer that question. Our finance director really would be better equipped. I do know that there are an enormous amount of funds available to help with people that are homeless or at risk of homeless, and the state or the county in some cases are buying up some of these motels and hotels and putting people in those situations. So a lot is happening there. It's not happening in Albany, but there's a lot of COVID money going towards that. In terms of what exactly we're getting out of and I'm sorry, I forget the name of the legislation that the president signed a month or so ago, but whatever it was called, my understanding is we don't know exactly what we're getting and what strings are attached to that. So right now, the Saha project, I think they're going after the more conventional types of funds, particularly the tax credits will be a big chunk of the financing package for them, and they're going to be working on that later this year.
Okay. Related to that, the housing choice vouchers or the rent subsidies, I've always liked them because they allow economic integration throughout the community when they're applied. I forget if you know, it'd be nice to know, can those help in the housing element, or how do those, can we get credit for an increase in housing choice vouchers or the old Section 8 program if the funding for that increases on the federal level and we actually get some recipients in Albany? Can we get credit for that from the HCD? Under the reports.
Right, I understand your question. Unfortunately, no. There are recipients, Section 8 recipients that do live in Albany, and part of the housing element research that Barry Miller will be doing for us is to document that, and we won't know exactly who they are, where they live, but we'll have an overall idea of the number of people who are recipients in Albany. But no, that does not count as an affordable unit towards us. Although I agree, it's for those who can get them, they're terrific because you can pick where you live and where is the most convenient for your household.
Right. Okay. I think that's unfortunate, but yeah, I think it's a good way to go. But anyway, okay.
Are there any other questions for staff before we open it up for public comment? All right. Oh, okay. Commissioner Pilch, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Two questions. So when our new numbers, new RENA numbers come, does that mean we'll be required to comply with them starting in the year 2023?
Yes, you're correct. January 2023.
Okay, thank you. And then second question, it states in the document that 1A, actually the very first one, that are under code enforcement, that with that action is ongoing to maintain building and housing code enforcement programs. My understanding is that we did not really have much of a program, or maybe it's more complaint driven. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, you're right. We don't have much of a program. We don't have a dedicated code enforcement staff person. So Ann and I do it along with our building inspector and our city attorney as we have capacity to do it, and we end up prioritizing situations that are kind of at the most extreme of life safety. So we aren't doing as many of those as we wish we had time to do.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understand the capacity limitations. I just wanted to understand if my understanding was correct. So thank you for that.
And that maybe we should probably clarify that status statement a little bit. Thank you. You're right about that.
Okay, thanks. That's it for me.
Okay, great. Then why don't we, Chris, go ahead and now open up for public comment. So if there are members of the public who would like to comment on this informational item, now is the time to get in the queue for public comment.
We have first speaker, Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes starting now.
I just want to say what a great report. That's interesting how there's very low amounts of very low income housing being built. It's either just low income or moderate, but it's once you get down to very low income, it doesn't seem too many people are going for that. But yet we got to qualify. We have to get a total of 80 of those, right? We got to get 80 very low income units, and we're only at 0 or 1. I'm probably wrong. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it seems like we got some work to do on the very low income category. And these numbers seem like they're based on, what's happened up to this point. I know we have some future things that are going to be great, regarding housing, which is the Albany Bowl and all these housing programs that are projects that are, put on hold right now. But so we're going to see some additional numbers on these. So not all the data is there because things are going to be happening in the future. We have master plan. So maybe we can include those somehow, kind of get an idea of what 2021 is going to look like. We're halfway through the year already. And also, if someone were to have a vacant lot, let's just say it's vacant land, maybe we can develop some new policy to where instead of having to build a 2-car garage first and then a mother house and then an ADU, maybe possibly you could just get some sort of residential structure up there without too many requirements just to make housing. If it's a vacant lot, maybe that's good for a very low income. Just put an ADU on a vacant lot. Might be illegal, but maybe we can look into that. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised for public comment.
Okay, this will be last call. If there are members of the public who wish to speak on this item, this is final call. All right, seeing no hands, then we will go ahead and close public comment and turn it back to the commission for deliberations or conversation on this informational item. Anyone like to kick things off? Commissioner McLeod.
I guess, Yeah, just more on the lines of kind of questions, but our targets are likely to be very high, and it's been difficult to hit what we've already had for this current cycle at a fairly much lower number. So yeah, the strategies for getting to this higher number is going to be interesting. And then I'm wondering, it's more about kind of the upzoning of the whole city. It's not really on our work plan at the moment, or in our what we're doing for this next year, as far as I understand. But wouldn't that be part of our housing element? Would be to say we're going to add 2 stories on Solano or something like that, or allow more dense development in other areas. But is that part of our process right now, including that kind of upzoning, or is that something that's going to be a completely different process that may take much longer because it's a bigger policy question?
Yeah, I can take a shot at it, and Anne may want to jump in as well. So I think you're right in the middle of looking at that question on San Pablo Avenue with the San Pablo specific plan. And that's going to complement the work that we're going to be doing on the housing element, certainly. And then there'll be other places in the city where the housing element you might develop a policy in the housing element that says we need to look at the zoning standards for these particular zoning districts, or we need to look at a particular property and rezone it to something else. And usually, I think again, Barry is really the expert on this. I'm kind of going from memory, but I think in the housing element, you can adopt policy to go work on something in the future. And I think you have 3 years to accomplish that policy, to implement a change, or at least bring that change to a vote. Some things might require a vote of the citizens in the ballot measure. We have some property that's restricted that way. Yes, that will be I would expect that will very much be a part of the housing element process. And like I say, Anne, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think with the last housing element cycle, we did include policies, and we would probably do so again, that would be basically pursued on a separate track, but they would have the implementation component of the housing element that would help us facilitate any code amendments that would have the intent of resulting in more housing unit creation.
Okay, yeah, I think that answers my question. So it would be, a much longer process, much more involved to go further than our San Pablo Avenue specific plan, but that certainly is going to help. Okay, that's really it. I think we have we have our work cut out for us. That's all I have to say. So.
And just for information, we do anticipate coming back to you at the May 12th meeting with Barry Miller, who's preparing our housing element. He will present you with effectively a policy audit of all the policies that are currently in the 1523 element. So that will give you a snapshot of what we've had on the books, and also what we've worked on in the past 6 years.
Okay, well, thanks. That's it for me, really. Thanks.
Anyone else? All right, I'll just sort of give my initial thoughts. I appreciate this update. I think this is a really clear sort of baseline kickoff, if you will, on sort of a lot of the legal and technical aspects of what the housing element needs to include and address at a very baseline. And it's actually that, even though the Excel spreadsheet is, not the best user interface, it's actually very clear on where we've been and where we're supposed to be for the current RHNA cycle. So I found that very interesting as well. Certainly look forward to developing this. I know our numbers are going to be bigger, and we've got hills to climb, and obviously we are not in control of the market and what proposals come across our desks. I think we've been doing a pretty good job on approving new housing proposals. So I at least feel like we need to commend ourselves at some level of not being an impediment body to housing production, which I think, it's some of the reason why the state is taking away local control, is when, local decision-making bodies are impediments to approving housing. But I feel like we've done a really, thoughtful job, but also sort of a pro-housing approach here of recognizing the state's urgent housing crisis. So anyhow, it's great seeing these stats. Look forward to more robust conversation. And I also candidly just really appreciate how succinct and topical this was. It made it very easy to sort of swallow the issue for today and thinking about it. So I appreciate breaking these things off in sort of bite-sized chunks, because this is a daunting topic, being the housing element update. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Great. With that, last call. Otherwise, with that, we will go ahead and close this informational item. And of course, I somehow lost the agenda already, but I know that is our last item this evening. That closes new business. And with that, next up, item 9 on our agenda is the next Planning Commission hearing, which is May 12th, same time, same place. So with that, our meeting this evening is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.